Hello friends, I'm Vishal Patel, lecturer, HVHP Institute of Postgraduate Studies and Research, KADI. And today my topic is Introduction to the Immune System, and that is of Immunology for the BSc Microbiology semester 3. So today we're looking for the immunity. So what is immunity? Immunity is a body's ability to resist or elimination of the potentially harmful foreign materials or abnormal cells. We can say the harmful materials or the microbes also. History. What imparts immunity? So starting from the 1890s, Emil von Behring and the Kitasato, serum from the vaccinated animals want the protective, and that was for the diphtheria. Matnikov, that he found cell-based immunity in 1880, and the Merrill's Chase in 1940 transfer of the WBC immunity for the tuberculosis. Since 1901, there have been 19 Nobel Prizes for the immunology-related research. So, what actually functions of immune system? This is the functional system, not an organ system. So complex system includes skin as a physical barrier, lining of mucous membrane as a physical barrier, secretions of tears, mucus, etc. as a microbial antimicrobial agents, blood cells and the vascular as a WBC, bone marrow, liver, mixed complement proteins, lymphatic system and the lymphoid organs that helps to involve into the immune system. Most tissues have a resident immune cells that can help for the immunity. So, immunity. Immunity, that means it's a Latin word exempt, state of protection from the infectious diseases. Immunity is the body's ability to resist or eliminate potentially harmful foreign materials or abnormal cells. Consists of the following activities: defense against invading pathogens, that would be bacteria and viruses, removal of the worn out cells, old RBCs, because they have 120 days ability, tissues, debris from injury or the disease, identification and the destruction of the abnormal or the mutant cells. They are not, means they don't have role in a cell system, reduction of the foreign cells, organ transplant, inappropriate responses like allergies, autoimmune disease effect. So this is consistent the following activities for the immunity. You can see immunity, that means elimination of the virus, carcinogen, pollution, germs, parasites, bacteria, fungi, and the toxins from our body. Overview of the immune system. There are two types of the immune system. First one is innate immunity. Second one is adaptive immunity. Innate immunity is known as a non-specific first-line defense immune system, and adaptive immunity is known as a specific second line of the defense immune system. So this is the chart of the typical immune response. You can see innate immunity, rapid responses to the broad range of the microbes. There are two types of defensive system, external as well as the internal. When we look out for the external defenses, skin, mucous membrane, and the secretions, different secretions are inverted into the external defenses. While in internal defenses, you can see the phagocytic cells, antimicrobial proteins, inflammatory responses, and the natural killer cells and the complement activations are included in the internal defenses. While other side, acquired immunity is a slower response, but it is specific to the microbes. So there are two types of the responses here. First one is a humoral response and second one is a cell mediated response. First one is an antibody mediated response and second one is a cytotoxic lymphocyte mediated response. So what is the difference between innate immunity and adaptive immunity? So innate immunity is has no time lag, but adaptive immunity take a lag period for the adaptation. Innate immunity is not antigen specific, but adaptive immunity is antigen specific. There is no memory for the innate immunity, but adaptive immunity develop the memory. So they can memorize our cells, our antigens, okay, by the production of the antibody. The innate immunity system. So innate immunity system described into the two parts. First one is external defenses and second one is the internal defenses, as I earlier said. Innate immunity system, external defenses. So first one is the anatomical barriers, that is known as the mechanical factors. So first one is the skin. Skin is anatomical or a physiological barrier. This is present in our body. Second is a mucociliary escalator, that is present in the mucous membrane. Third one is the flushing actions of the saliva, tears, and the urine. So, as we know, the saliva is present in our salivary glands, tears are present in our eye, and urine is generated in the urogenital pathways. So, they have flushing action, so they can use or act as anatomical barriers. Anatomical barriers are the chemical factors also, like antimicrobial peptides in the sweat. Sweat that is produced to cool down our body. So that sweat contains the antimicrobial peptides that can cleave the microbes, enzymes, and microbial cell wall. Second one is the HCl in stomach. We all know that this is the gastric acid, and that acid having the high acidity in our stomach. So no microbes are able to grow or able to live in that particular environment. Third one is the lysozyme in tears. So what exactly? Saliva and tears contain the lysozyme. Lysozyme is the one type of the enzyme that cleave the bond between or the cell wall. So they can cleave the microorganisms. So these are the chemical factors that is present in the different like sweat, stomach, and the tears and saliva. Stomach containing the mucous membrane. Anatomical barriers as biological factors. As a normal flora, microbes in many parts of the body that is present and act as a normal flora. They can't be harmful, they can't be pathogen, but they are present on the body surface. So there are thousand species of the bacteria, more than thousand species of bacteria of the normal flora present in our body, and competes with the pathogen for the nutrient and the space. So this is a external factor that can act as anatomical barriers or the physical barriers. Now let's talk on the innate immune system for the internal defenses. So innate immune system components of the blood. So blood containing two parts, plasma and the red blood cells, serum. So plasma containing a complement protein, coagulation proteins, and the cytokines. While a buffy coat composed of the white blood cells and the platelets that are important, and that is known as a WBCs. So this is the extracellular part, but that is known as a interesting factors for the immune system, innate immunity. Let's start with the white blood cells. You can see here the monocyte, eosinophils, lymphocyte, neutrophils, and the basophils. Lymphocyte that is divided into the three types: B lymphocyte, T lymphocyte, and the natural killer cells. And monocyte is a non-activated stage, but later on, when it will active, that is converted into the macrophages. Neutrophils in innate immune system. Here we are looking for the innate immunity. So we will discuss only those cells they have a role into the innate immunity. So first one is a neutrophil. So that is very most abundant WBC, around 50 to 60% abundance into the WBCs in the blood. This is the very efficient phagocytic cells, most important cells of the innate immune system. So neutrophil having a phagocytotic activity. So what is phagocytosis? Phago means to eat and cyte the cells, eating of different microbes or the foreign particles by the cells. WBCs, most example is the neutrophil, find, eat and digest microbes. That is the process of the phagocytosis. You can see the different videos of the neutrophils that can find the microbes and eat and the phagocytosis. This is the link for that the neutrophil find microbes. How do exactly neutrophils eat and they digest microbes? This is the figure of this is neutrophil. This is the pseudopodia. This is the plasma membrane of that particular neutrophil. Once these microbes get attracted by this neutrophil by the different lysozymes or different chemicals, chemotaxis, they can attract to the neutrophil. Then ingestion started, and with the help of the lysosome and the phagosome, they digested these microbes and eat totally. So this is the simple process of the neutrophil, how neutrophil eat and they digest microbes. What is in the granules? These granules, as I say, digestive enzyme with the phagosomes. The both processes occurred. First one is a biological, the second one is a chemically. Chemically in the means in the presence of the lysozyme. That is an enzyme that is used for the cleavage of that particular microbes, and with the use of the physical barrier, they are doing the ingestions. Second is the monocytes. Monocytes having less than 5% or the equivalent to the 5% of the WBC equivalent migrate into the tissues and they become macrophages. When they get migrated into the tissues, they become the macrophages in active state. Here you can see this is the tissue macrophages come into the lungs, bone, and histocytes. So they are as known as the coupler cells, microglia, intestinal macrophages, alveolar macrophage, osteoclast, histocytes. Okay, so macrophages are the big eaters. Phagocytosis of the microbes in tissues. Neutrophils are present only in the blood. So phagocytosis normally done by the macrophages because macrophages also present in the different tissues. This is known as the antigen presenting cells also. Next one is the natural killer cells. Natural killer cells is not B lymphocyte, not a T lymphocyte. This is important part of the innate immune system. They kill the viruses and the bacteria infected cells. Okay, that cells that are infected with the virus and the bacteria, that particular cells are destroyed by the natural killer cells. So they kill cancer cells also. Okay, so here this is the picture how they are doing the process for the cells they are infected with the viruses and the bacteria. NK cell differentiate choose to kill cells to kill. They do not affect uninfected cells or normal cells, but your cells is infected or it is cancerous, your nature killer cells will destroy that particular cell. Toll-like receptors, known as the TLR. This is the transmembrane protein. It has a great role in innate immunity too. They are present on the macrophages or that is present on the few other cells, conserved across the vertebrates, important part of the innate immune system as I earlier said. What they do, they look out for the microbes or their component on the cell surface. They bind to the microbes or their component. They trigger a cascade of the events to kill or protect against the pathogen. They are the immune sensors. Here you can see these are the security and they are going to alert the cell system if any component of microbes are present on the cell surface. Look out for the microbes. You can see. And the microbes bind to the TLRs. Components of the microbes are bind to the TLRs. What happens when the TLR bind to the microbes? There, when there are four different mechanisms occurred: secretion of the cytokines on the interferon, inflammation, and the phagocytosis of the infected cells and the apoptosis of the infected cells. These four systems occurred when the TLR binding to the microbes. Summary: innate response, internal defenses, cellular. Come into the play when the external defenses are the breached: neutrophils, monocytes or macrophages, nature killer cells, and the TLRs are the important features for the innate immunity as the internal defenses. Component of blood. We were discussed this WBC, okay, a role of the WBC into the innate immunity. What about the complement proteins, coagulation proteins, and the cytokines? So, what are the cytokines? That are the small proteins secreted by the cells of the immune system. So, affect the behavior of the other cells. Okay, you can see this is the cytokine gene that is present in the cell by these. Means immune response. The cell secrete this cytokine, and that cytokine is very important for the triggering the cells as a part of the signal. They act as a receptor and give the signal to the biological effect. Key players in innate acquired immunity. This is known as signaling molecules. Which cells release the cytokines? There are different cells. You can see the neutrophils when they encounter pathogen, macrophages when they encounter pathogen, TLR bind to the microbes or component of the microbes, nature killer cells on the encountering the microbe infected cells or the tumor cells, and the lymphocyte when they are activated. Examples of the cytokines is known as the interferons, interleukins, and the tumor necrosis factor T and F. Complement. This is the very important third line defense system of the innate immunity. A large number of the distinct plasma protein that react with the one another, that is known to C1 to the C9 cascade C protein. Complement can bind to the microbes and code the microbes. Essential part of the innate immune response, enhances adaptive immune response taught later. This is the complement protein role into the innate immunity. You can see these C protein are able to do three processes. First one is to facilitate the phagocytosis. Second is the direct lysis of the pathogen, and third one inflammation. Okay, how do these C proteins facilitate the phagocytosis? So, normally, bacteria that is coated with the C protein, you can see here, this is the C3b, IC3b or C4b. So, this binding of the C protein to the bacterial cells that enhance the phagocytosis. On the other hand, you can see phagocytotic cells, they containing the complement receptor, and by the binding with this phagocytotic cells, these microorganism can destroy by these phagocytotic cells. So this is the triggering process of the microbes for the phagocytosis. How do C protein lyses the pathogens? You can see here this membrane attack complex formed by the C protein. This is the mechanism behind this complex proteins and the cell walls of the bacteria that do the puncture activated complemented proteins from the complexes of the protein that create the holes into the bacterial cell wall, and by the doing the cell wall holes, the cell secretions get outed from the cell wall of the bacteria and cells get punctured, and by this process your microbes get punctured by the C proteins, and that can your bacteria can destroy by this mechanism. So pathogen cannot be alive by this C protein. Coagulation proteins. Coagulation mechanism to stop bleeding after injury to the blood vessels. That is very important. Complex pathway involves the platelets, coagulation factors, and the vitamin K. How does blood clot? There are three steps for the formation of the blood clot. Starting from the platelets attack to the endothelium or the place where your injuries occurred. Second step, the platelets start to the release the fibrin and begin to the seal of the endothelium. Here, this platelets are secreted the fibrin protein that act as a sealing, that do the sealing process at this site of the injury. And the third stage, the fibrin network tracks the RBC and completely seals the endothelium. With the use of the RBC, this is the red blood cells, fibrin polymers. This make one breach and seal this that particular site of the injury. Okay, you can see here also fibrin clot, platelets plug, vessels contract, injury of the damage. Okay, coagulation. is a delicate balance because coagulation proteins that blood clotting, inflammation, and the apoptosis, while anticoagulating prevent blood clotting, inhibit inflammation, and inhibit the apoptosis. So coagulation and anticoagulation both having a different distinct features. Coagulation and the innate immunity. Here, pathogens and cytokines are doing the coagulation while anticoagulating alone. Coagulation protein increase the inflammation and increase the apoptosis of the infected cells. So if your pathogens are present, they are doing this such type of activity to reduce our innate immunity and to reduce the chances of the anticoagulant. So this is the summary. What happens when the external defenses fail? We see the innate immunity with the external defenses and the internal defenses with the phagocytosis cells, antimicrobial proteins, inflammatory response, natural killer cells, and the complement. Innate immunity, innate response, internal defenses. So, cellular, neutrophils, monocyte, NK cells, and TLR. On the other hand, extracellular cytokines, complement, and the coagulations. Inflammation, complex biological process by which body responds to the pathogens and the irritants associated with the swelling of tissues. Key player in innate immune response. I think all was going by the inflammation process. All roads lead to the inflammation. Here you can see neutrophils, monocyte, natural killer cells, TLRs are known as the cellular. They are also do the inflammation, responsible for the inflammation. Other side, extracellular like cytokines, interferons, C proteins, coagulation proteins also responsible for the inflammation. So what exactly inflammation and the vascular changes? Vasodilation of tissues or blood vessels. Here you can see this is the normal blood vessels. By the inflammation, you can see the dilated blood vessels. Increase the capillary permeability. This is the normal blood vessels. But by doing inflammation, all the rushes of the blood cells, all type of the WBCs rush to that particular site where the inflammation will be taken. Signs of the inflammation, as I earlier said, that the vascular changes, vasodilation, heat or the redness, and the fever are the symptoms of the inflammation, while at the capillary permeability, swelling, pain, and the temporary loss of the functions. So redness and the heat as an example of the burn, and the swelling if someone bitten you by some rod or by something. So this is symptoms of the swelling. So this is the signs of the inflammation. Here, this is the sites or the symptoms or the role of the inflammation signs for the, you can see the heat, redness, swelling, pain. Okay, inflammation and the innate immunity. So actual inflammatory response that mediates the inflammation by the pathogen removal. So vascular permeability and the dilation, neutrophil and the macrophages chemotaxis. By the inflammation, neutrophils and macrophages rushes towards the sites of the inflammation. They came for the phagocytosis of the microbes that are present at the site of the inflammation. Okay, so this is the preliminary role of the macrophages and the neutrophil at the site of the inflammation. This is the histamine that is produced by the cell, and that leads to the adaptive immune response. Role of the inflammation in innate immunity. This is the initiation of the phagocytosis. If pathogens are present at the site of the inflammation, macrophages and the neutrophil will kill that particular pathogen by the phagocytosis, limiting the spread of the infections. Obviously, they reduce the chances of the infection spreading. stimulate the adaptive immune response, and initiate the tissue repair. So, not everything about the inflammation is good. This that is proved by this picture, Godzilla, Godzilla and the Badzilla. If someone is giving roses to that particular dinosaur, this is the Godzilla. But this dinosaur will feed out the particular man who gave her or his flower. So that is a Badzilla. So both having a different distinct features. The good and the bad about the inflammation. So, progressing and the healing, there are two sides for the inflammation. First one is the progressing and healing, and second is the progressive and the destruction. So, on the first side, progressive and healing, you can see the chemical irritant, prostable, cuts, okay, trauma, allergic reactions, burn, and the infection. This is the preliminary response of the inflammation. While the progressive destruction, if inflammation is going higher and higher, cardiovascular disease, autism, rheumatoid arthritis, autoimmune disease, neurological disease, Alzheimer, and the cancer also. So you can see this is the bridge between inflammation for the destruction for the healing. Okay, so good and bad both for the inflammation. Okay, acute and short term, and the chronic and the long term. Chronic inflammation or the tissue damage. Chronic inflammation macrophages in the injured tissues. Macrophages release toxins, including the reactive oxygen species or the ROS that injured the tissues. Here you can see this is the normal tissues and this is the chronic inflammation tissues where there are so much numbers of the macrophages present. Chronic inflammation is almost always accompanied by the tissue destruction. Okay, this is the picture of the chronic inflammation and the tissue damage. Here you can see the activities, immunogens and the antigens. So what is immunogen and antigen? A substance that elicit the immune response. Humoral or cell-mediated immune response, a substance that act as a foreign material but that is responsible to elicit or adequate or generate the immune response of our body. It is known as immunogen and antigen. Okay, so thank you so much for listening me.